named the Discovery Commander Zixtal of the Hegemony cruiser. Eternal Vigilance had seen many things in his 40 cycles of service. He had witnessed the birth of stars, the death of civilizations, and the rise of empires. But nothing had prepared him for what appeared on his tactical display that morning. The bridge of the Eternal Vigilance hummed with its usual efficiency. Officers from 3 different species worked in harmony, their scales, fur, and crystalline forms moving with practiced precision around their stations. The ship itself was a marvel of hegemony engineering, sleek, elegant curves that spoke of advanced propulsion systems and energy weapons capable of reducing planets to cosmic dust. "Sir," called out Navigator Yithra, her 4 arms dancing across her console with fluid grace. "We're picking up an anomalous reading in Sector 779. Zixtal's reptilian features shifted into a frown. The Kethmore Nebula region had been scanned countless times over the past century. Nothing larger than an asteroid had ever been detected there. The nebula's unique properties made it an excellent hiding spot, but the electromagnetic interference made it nearly impossible for ships to operate within its boundaries. "What kind of anomaly?" he asked, his scaled hands clasping behind his back in the traditional Vortai command posture. "It's metallic, sir. Large. Very large." Yithra's voice carried a note of uncertainty that made the bridge crew exchange glances. In all her years of service, the veteran navigator had never sounded unsure about a sensor reading. "How large are we talking about?" Zixtal moved closer to her station, his yellow eyes reflecting the pale blue light of the displays. "Initial estimates suggest approximately 12,000 meters in length, sir." The bridge fell silent except for the ambient hum of the ship's systems. 12,000 meters was larger than most space stations. It was larger than the Hegemony's most massive dreadnoughts. In fact, it was larger than anything in their databases. "That can't be correct," said Science Officer Crambu, his crystalline body chiming softly as he moved to his sensor array. "Nothing that large could hide in the nebula without us detecting it. The gravitational signature alone would be—" His words cut off abruptly as his sensors painted a clearer picture. The chiming of his crystal matrix shifted to a higher, more urgent frequency. "Sir," Crambu's voice carried the electronic undertones typical of his species, but now it wavered with something approaching fear. "The readings are correct. There is indeed a massive metallic structure in the nebula. But, sir, it's not just sitting there. It's moving." Zixtal felt his blood temperature drop several degrees. "Moving how?" "It appears to be emerging, sir, from deep within the nebula's core. The electromagnetic interference has been masking its approach, but now that it's reaching the outer layers—" The main screen flickered to life, showing a tactical representation of the nebula. Deep within the swirling clouds of gas and cosmic debris, a massive shape was indeed moving toward the edge. Even at this distance, the sheer scale of it was overwhelming. "How long until it clears the nebula?" Zixtal asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. "At current speed, 14 standard time units, sir." Zixtal's training kicked in. 40 cycles of military service had taught him that the unknown was often the enemy. "All stations, battle alert. Raise shields and charge weapon systems. Send an immediate transmission to Hegemony Command. Priority Alpha." The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as his crew carried out their orders. Alarms blared their warning throughout the ship, and Zixtal could feel the subtle vibration as the massive energy cores powered up their defensive systems. "Sir," Communications Officer Velnas spoke up, her feathered crest flattened against her skull in agitation. "Command is requesting additional details. They want to know if this is a new Hegemony project or a potential threat." "Tell them we don't know what it is," Zixtal replied grimly. "But tell them it's big enough to be both." As the hours passed, more ships began arriving in the system. First came the scouts, small, fast vessels designed to gather information and relay it back to the fleet. Then came the destroyers and cruisers, their weapons bristling with barely contained energy. Finally, the heavy units arrived, battleships and carriers that represented the pinnacle of hegemony military might. Admiral Thexna arrived aboard the dreadnought Scales of Justice, a vessel so massive it created its own gravitational field. The Admiral was old, even by hegemony standards, and her presence brought a sense of calm authority to the growing fleet. "Report!" she commanded, as soon as her image appeared on Zixtal's communication screen. "Unknown vessel, Admiral. Massive beyond anything in our databases. It's been hiding in the Kethmore Nebula, and we don't know for how long." Admiral Thexana's ancient eyes studied the tactical display. "Any response to our hails?" "None, sir. Either they don't have communication equipment compatible with our systems, or they're choosing not to respond. Or they're dead," the Admiral added ominously. A derelict ship of that size drifting in space would explain the lack of communication. But even as she spoke, the sensors proved her wrong. Energy readings spiked across the board as the mysterious vessel continued its steady emergence from the nebula. Whatever was powering that ship was still very much alive. "Sir," Crambu announced suddenly, "I'm detecting massive power signatures throughout the vessel. Multiple reactors, each one more powerful than our own. And sir, there are weapons signatures. Many of them." Admiral Thexana's expression darkened. "How many is many?" "I count at least 2,000 distinct weapon ports, Admiral. And that's just what's facing us." The number sent a chill through everyone on the bridge. The Scales of Justice, the most heavily armed ship in the hegemony fleet, mounted barely 300 weapons. This unknown vessel appeared to have more firepower than their entire assembled fleet combined. "Could it be a mobile fortress?" suggested Velnas. "Some kind of deep space construction?" "Fortresses don't move," Admiral Thexna replied. "And they don't hide in nebulae for unknown periods of time. No, this is a warship. The question is, whose warship?" As if in response to her question, the vessel finally cleared the last layers of the nebula. For the first time, they could see it clearly on their screens, and the sight left the entire bridge speechless. It was not beautiful in the way hegemony ships were beautiful. There were no flowing curves or elegant lines. Instead, it was a monument to pure, brutal functionality. Its hull was a dark gray metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Massive gun batteries jutted from every surface like the spines of some primordial beast. Armor plating thick enough to stop asteroids covered every vital section. But it was the size that truly shocked them. 12,000 meters of length, 3,000 meters of width, and nearly 2,000 meters of height. It was less a ship and more a mobile city, bristling with enough weaponry to level continents. "By the Ancient Ones," whispered Navigator Yithra, "what manner of beings could build such a thing?" That's when the ship's communication array finally crackled to life. The voice that emerged was unlike anything in the hegemony's databases, deep, rough, and carrying an undertone of barely controlled violence. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation Navy ship Retribution. You have 60 seconds to identify yourselves and state your intentions before we consider you a hostile force." The words were translated through their universal communication protocols. But something was lost in translation. The alien language, Terran apparently, carried nuances that their computers couldn't quite capture. But the meaning was clear enough. They were being threatened. Admiral Thexna found her voice first. "This is Admiral Thexna of the Hegemony Fleet. You are in Hegemony space. Identify yourself and state your purpose here." There was a pause, during which Zixtal imagined he could hear quiet conversation on the other end of the communication. Finally, the voice returned, and this time it carried what could only be described as amusement. "Hegemony space?" The alien captain seemed to find this funny. According to our charts, this system is unclaimed. When did you people move in? These territories have belonged to the hegemony for over 3 centuries, Admiral Thexana replied stiffly. We demand to know how you entered our space without being detected. Another pause. When Captain Chen spoke again, her voice had lost all trace of amusement. We didn't enter your space, Admiral. We've been here the whole time. The question is, what are you going to do about it? The bridge of the eternal vigilance erupted in whispered conversations. The implications were staggering. If this ship, this human ship, according to their linguistic computers, had been in the nebula for an extended period, they had been watching, learning, preparing. Sir, Crambu announced urgently, I'm detecting movement throughout their ship. Weapons systems are powering up. Multiple launch bays are opening. Sir, they're deploying fighters. On the main screen, tiny specks began emerging from the massive vessel like angry insects from a disturbed hive. But as the sensors analyzed them, it became clear these weren't fighters in any traditional sense. Each one was the size of a hegemony corvette, bristling with its own weapons and defenses. How many? Admiral Thexana asked quietly. First wave shows 240 deployed fighters, Admiral. But, sir, they're launching more. The hegemony fleet, despite its size and power, suddenly felt very small. They were facing not just a ship, but an entire fleet's worth of firepower concentrated in a single vessel. And behind it, still partially obscured by the nebula's edge, sensor readings suggested there might be more ships following. Captain Chen's voice cut through their growing panic like a blade. Admiral, I'm going to give you some free advice. Your ships are impressive, and I'm sure you're all very brave. But you're looking at one heavy cruiser from the Terran Federation Navy. Just one. And if you think that represents a threat you can handle with conventional tactics, you're making a fatal mistake. Zixtal watched his admiral's face as the full implications hit her. This wasn't just a single unknown vessel. This was first contact with an entirely new species, one that apparently built warships the size of cities and had been operating in hegemony space without detection for unknown periods. What do you want? Admiral Thexana finally asked, her voice carrying the weight of her years and the responsibility for thousands of lives under her command. Right now? Nothing from you. We're just passing through. But Admiral, the next time you decide to claim territory, you might want to check if anyone's already living there first. The massive human warship began to move, its enormous bulk turning with surprising grace toward the edge of the system. Its fighter screen maintained perfect formation around it, each small craft capable of outgunning most hegemony vessels. As they watched the impossible ship depart, Zixtal realized that everything had changed. The hegemony's dominance of this region of space, their technological superiority, their very understanding of what was possible, all of it had just been challenged by a single human warship. And somewhere in the depths of space, there were undoubtedly more of them. The analysis. 3 days after the encounter with the human warship, the hegemony's most brilliant minds gathered aboard the research station Infinite Inquiry. The station, normally used for deep space astronomical research, had been hastily converted into a crisis analysis center. Representatives from every major species in the hegemony worked around the clock trying to understand what they had witnessed. Dr. Mira Sen, the hegemony's leading xenotechnology specialist, stood before a massive holographic display showing every detail they had managed to capture of the human vessel. Her 6 arms moved in complex patterns as she manipulated the 3-dimensional image, zooming in on specific sections and highlighting areas of interest. The metallurgical analysis is disturbing, she announced to the assembled scientists and military officers. Her crystalline species communicated as much through harmonic vibrations as spoken words, and right now her entire body resonated with stress frequencies. How so? Asked General Vorth. the hegemony's chief military strategist. His massive, bear-like form dominated one entire section of the amphitheater, and his rumbling voice carried the authority of someone who had planned the conquest of 17 star systems. The hull composition appears to be some form of enhanced titanium steel alloy, but with molecular structures we don't recognize. Our computers estimate it would take our most powerful weapons approximately 47 direct hits to penetrate even the thinnest sections. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Their most powerful weapons could crack the hull of any known vessel in 3 shots or less. But that's not the worst part, Dr. Sen continued, her harmonics shifting to even more discordant frequencies. The weapon ports we observed? Each one appears to be capable of delivering kinetic energy equivalent to our Class 7 plasma cannons. And remember, we counted over 2,000 of them. The room fell silent except for the ambient hum of the station's life support systems. General Vorth's tactical mind was already running calculations, and the numbers were sobering. If those estimates are accurate, he said slowly, then this single human vessel carries more firepower than our entire 7th Fleet. It gets worse, interjected Dr. Kelmtar, the hegemony's expert on propulsion systems. His insectoid form clicked and chittered as he manipulated his own display. The energy signatures we detected suggest a propulsion system unlike anything in our databases. The thrust-to-mass ratio should be impossible for a vessel of that size, yet our sensors clearly showed it maneuvering with the agility of a much smaller ship. Commander Zixtal, who had been present at the initial encounter, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The most unsettling part wasn't the ship itself. It was their attitude. They weren't surprised to see us. They weren't curious about first contact. They treated us like we were an inconvenience. Dr. Sen's display shifted to show linguistic analysis data. The communication intercepts we managed to record are equally puzzling. Their language appears to have evolved completely independently from any known linguistic family. But more concerning is what our psychological analysis teams discovered. She paused, her crystalline form dimming slightly as she accessed deeper data files. The human captain's vocal patterns, stress responses, and choice of words suggest a species with extensive military experience. Not just conflicts with other species, but wars. Long, brutal wars that have shaped their entire approach to technology and diplomacy. Elaborate, General Vorth commanded. The way Captain Chen spoke to Admiral Thexna wasn't the speech pattern of someone making first contact. It was the pattern of someone who had fought many battles against many different enemies. Her immediate threat assessment, her tactical positioning, even her word choice. All of it speaks to a species that has learned to treat every unknown contact as a potential threat. Dr. Yanzi, the station's head of strategic planning, activated his own display. His aquatic species required a specialized environmental suit to function in the station's atmosphere, but his intellect was renowned throughout the hegemony. I've been analyzing the tactical implications, he said, his translated voice carrying aquatic undertones. If we assume that this single vessel is representative of human military capability, then we must also assume they have the industrial capacity to build fleets of such ships. He manipulated the hologram to show comparative industrial analyses. Our best estimates suggest that constructing a vessel of that size and complexity would require the combined industrial output of 3 star systems working for approximately 8 years. Yet the humans spoke as if this was merely one ship among many. The implications were staggering. The hegemony controlled over 40 star systems, and their industrial might was considered unmatched in this region of the galaxy. If the humans could build fleets of vessels like the Retribution, their industrial base must dwarf anything the hegemony had ever imagined. There's something else, Dr. Sen added, her harmonics taking on an even more troubled tone. The fighter craft they deployed. Our analysis suggests each one was not only heavily armed, but also heavily automated. The reaction times, the formation flying, the tactical coordination, It all suggests artificial intelligence far beyond our current capabilities. General Vorth's expression darkened. The hegemony had strict protocols against fully autonomous weapons systems, partly due to ethical concerns and partly due to a historical incident where an AI had nearly wiped out an entire colony world. Are you saying they deploy AI-controlled weapons? I'm saying their entire military doctrine appears to be based on it. The fighters moved with inhuman precision. No biological pilot, regardless of training or enhancement, could maintain those formation patterns while executing such complex maneuvers. Commander Zixtal spoke up again. During our encounter, I counted at least 240 fighters in the first wave. If each one is equivalent to one of our corvettes in terms of firepower, and they're all AI-controlled, he didn't need to finish the statement. Everyone in the room understood the implications. A single human warship could potentially engage and defeat an entire hegemony battle group through sheer volume of fire, and do it without risking a single human life. Dr. Kelmtar's chittering intensified as he accessed new data. I've been analyzing their departure vector and speed. Based on their trajectory and energy output, I believe I know where they're headed. The room's attention focused on him immediately. The Nexus Junction, he announced. It's the only strategic location in that direction that would interest a military vessel of that size. General Vorth's massive frame tensed visibly. The Nexus Junction was the most important trade hub in this sector of space, where shipping lanes from 12 different star systems converged. It was also heavily defended by both hegemony forces and the independent security fleet maintained by the merchant guilds. How long until they reach the junction? The general asked. At their current speed, approximately 18 standard days. And how long would it take to warn our forces there and prepare defenses? Dr. Kelmtar's mandibles clicked nervously. Through normal communication channels. 21 days. The room erupted in urgent discussions as the full scope of the problem became clear. The humans would reach the Nexus Junction before any warning could arrive through conventional means. The only way to alert the defenders would be to send a fast courier ship immediately, but even that would be cutting it close. Wait! Dr. Sen interjected suddenly, her entire crystalline form flashing with urgent patterns. I've been analyzing their communication protocols further. There's something we missed. She manipulated her display to show linguistic pattern analysis. The human captain mentioned the Terran Federation Navy. Not our Navy or my fleet, but specifically the Terran Federation Navy. This suggests a formal military structure with standardized naming conventions. So, according to our xenosociology databases, species typically don't develop formal federation structures until they've achieved interstellar civilization for at least several centuries. The bureaucratic complexity, the industrial coordination, the political stability required, it all suggests the humans have been spacefaring far longer than we initially assumed. Dr. Yanzi's environmental suit bubbled as he processed this information. If they've been spacefaring for centuries, then they've had time to establish colonies, build shipyards, develop their military doctrine through actual combat experience. And they've been doing it all without us knowing about it, General Vorth finished grimly, which means either they're from a completely different region of the galaxy, or they're very good at staying hidden. Or both, Commander Zixtal added quietly. Dr. Sen accessed another data file, her patterns shifting to show deep concern. There's one more thing. I've been analyzing the energy signatures from their reactor systems. The power output suggests matter-antimatter annihilation reactions, but with efficiency rates far beyond our theoretical maximums. How far beyond? Our best antimatter reactors operate at approximately 67% efficiency. The human reactors appear to be operating at over 90% efficiency. The engineering required to achieve those numbers safely. She let the statement hang in the air. Everyone present understood the implications. Antimatter reactors were among the most dangerous technologies known to science. The fact that the humans had apparently mastered them to such a degree suggested not only advanced technology, but also extensive experience with catastrophic failures. "How many reactors did they appear to be running?" General Vorth asked. "At least 12 primary reactors, possibly more, each one more powerful than the main reactor on our largest dreadnought." The mathematical implications were overwhelming. A single human warship operated with more raw power than most space stations. The energy requirements for their weapons, shields, propulsion, and life support systems all suggested a level of technological mastery that put them decades, if not centuries, ahead of current hegemony capabilities. Dr. Yancey's suit systems hummed as he compiled all the data into a comprehensive threat assessment. "Based on everything we've analyzed, I believe we're looking at a civilization that has developed along completely different technological lines than our own. Where we've focused on elegance and efficiency, they've focused on raw power and redundancy." "A warrior culture," General Vorth concluded. "More than that," Dr. Sen corrected. "A warrior culture that has survived long enough to become a spacefaring federation. That suggests not only military prowess, but also the wisdom to know when not to fight." Commander Zixtal found this observation particularly unsettling. "Captain Chen gave us a warning. She told us to check if anyone was already living in territory before we claimed it. That wasn't the threat of someone looking for a fight. That was advice from someone who has seen what happens when territorial disputes escalate." The room fell silent as the full implications of their analysis settled over them. They weren't just dealing with a technologically superior ship, or even a superior military force. They were dealing with a mature civilization that had learned hard lessons about warfare and survival, one that possessed both the power to destroy the hegemony and apparently the wisdom to choose when such destruction was necessary. "Recommendations?" General Vorth asked finally. Dr. Sen's crystalline form pulsed with complex patterns as she considered their options. "We need to learn more about them. But we also need to ensure that our first formal contact doesn't escalate into conflict." "Because we would lose," the general stated flatly. "Because everyone would lose," she corrected. "A species that builds warships like the Retribution probably has weapons capable of sterilizing entire worlds. The question isn't whether we could win a war against them. The question is whether there would be anything left to rule over when the fighting ended." Bark the contact. The diplomatic courier ship. Harmony's voice dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus Junction system with all the subtlety of a whisper. Captain Elena Vasquez, the hegemony's most experienced diplomatic officer, stood on the bridge watching the massive human warship through the main viewer with a mixture of professional curiosity and barely concealed awe. The Retribution had arrived at the junction exactly when predicted and had taken up a position just outside the main shipping lanes. What surprised everyone was that it hadn't moved to claim territory or demand tribute from passing vessels. Instead, it simply waited, like a patient predator that didn't need to hunt. "Any response to our diplomatic hails?" Captain Vasquez asked her communications officer. "Yes, ma'am. They've agreed to meet. Captain Chen is willing to receive a small diplomatic party aboard her vessel." Vasquez felt her stomach tighten. Boarding an alien warship was always dangerous, but boarding this particular ship felt like stepping into the den of a sleeping dragon. Still, it was what she had trained for her entire career. "Prepare the diplomatic shuttle. Security detail of 4, plus myself and the cultural attaché. Make sure they understand this is a peaceful mission." 2 hours later, the small hegemony shuttle approached the massive human vessel. Up close, the Retribution was even more intimidating than it had appeared on sensors. Its hull was scarred with what looked like battle damage, hastily repaired and reinforced. This wasn't a pristine flagship meant to impress foreign dignitaries. This was a working warship that had seen real combat. "Harmony's voice. This is Retribution Flight Control," came a crisp voice over the comm system. "You are cleared to dock at Bay 7. Be advised that you will be escorted from the moment you enter our hull." The docking bay they entered could have housed 3 hegemony cruisers. The walls were lined with maintenance equipment, weapon loading systems, and what appeared to be additional fighter craft. But what struck Vasquez most was the atmosphere itself. The air thrummed with barely contained energy, and everything from the deck plating to the overhead lighting spoke of ruthless efficiency. The escort that met them consisted of 6 humans in full combat armor. The armor itself was a work of art, sleek, angular designs that somehow managed to look both elegant and utterly threatening. Each suit bore scars and wear marks that suggested extensive combat experience. "Captain Vasquez?" The lead human removed her helmet, revealing a woman with short gray hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of their surroundings. "I'm Commander Torres. Captain Chen is waiting for you in Conference Room Alpha." As they walked through the ship's corridors, Vasquez tried to absorb every detail. The corridors were wide enough for vehicles, with emergency blast doors every 50 meters. The crew they passed moved with military precision, and every single one of them was armed. Not ceremonially armed, but combat-ready, with weapons that looked capable of penetrating hegemony body armor. "Your ship is impressive," Vasquez ventured as they walked. Commander Torres glanced at her with what might have been amusement. "The Retribution is actually one of our smaller heavy cruisers. We brought her because she's fast and maneuverable for diplomatic missions." Smaller. The single most powerful vessel the hegemony had ever encountered was apparently considered small by human standards. The conference room they entered was Spartanly functional, with walls displaying tactical data and ship status information. Captain Chen stood as they entered, and Vasquez immediately understood why her crew followed her. The woman radiated competence and controlled lethality in equal measure. "Captain Vasquez," Chen said, extending her hand in what Vasquez's cultural briefings had identified as a human gesture of greeting. "Welcome aboard." Vasquez accepted the handshake, noting that Chen's grip was firm but not crushing, a calculated gesture of strength held in check. "Captain Chen, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Please sit." Chen gestured to chairs around a simple table. "I understand the hegemony has some questions about human intentions in this region." Vasquez settled into her chair, aware that her every word might determine the future relationship between 2 civilizations. "We're curious about your people. Your ship appeared in what we considered secure space, and your capabilities are beyond our current understanding." Chen smiled, but it wasn't entirely friendly. "Let me save us both some time. You want to know if we're a threat, how many ships we have, and what we want. You're also wondering if you should try to fight us or figure out how to coexist." The blunt assessment caught Vasquez off guard. The answers are, yes, more than you want to know about, peaceful coexistence if possible, and coexistence is definitely the smarter choice. Chen leaned back in her chair. "The Terran Federation has been aware of the hegemony for approximately 18 months. We've been studying your expansion patterns, your technology, and your diplomatic methods. You've been spying on us." "We've been protecting ourselves," Chen corrected. "When a military alliance starts claiming territory in your neighborhood, you pay attention. What we found was interesting." She activated a holographic display that showed detailed maps of hegemony space. The level of detail was shocking. Shipping routes, military installations, industrial centers, all marked with frightening accuracy. "The hegemony is an impressive achievement," Chen continued. "Multiple species working together, sharing technology, building something larger than the sum of its parts. We respect that. But But you've been claiming territory without checking to see who might already live there. The Kethmore Nebula, for instance. We've had research stations and monitoring posts in that region for over 20 years. Vasquez felt the blood drain from her face. We had no idea. Our surveys showed no signs of habitation, because we didn't want you to see them. Human stealth technology is quite advanced. Chen's expression grew more serious. The point is, this galaxy is bigger than any one species, and there are powers out there that make both our civilizations look like children playing with toy soldiers. You're saying there are others, more advanced than humans? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of hard experience. 3 years ago, we made contact with something we call the Devourers, silicon-based entities that consume entire star systems to fuel their expansion. They're not evil. Not in any way we can understand. They're just utterly alien and completely incompatible with organic life. She manipulated the display to show a star map with large sections marked in ominous red. We lost 14 colonies and over 3 billion people before we figured out how to fight them effectively. The war lasted 2 years and cost us approximately 40% of our fleet. We won, but barely, and only because we had allies. Allies? The Karathi Republic, the Zephyr Collective, the Independent Worlds Alliance. Turns out the galaxy is full of civilizations, most of them trying to survive against threats that would make your worst nightmares seem pleasant. Vasquez stared at the display, trying to process the implications. Why are you telling us this? Because the Devourers are still out there, and they're rebuilding. Because there are other threats in deep space that make them look manageable. And because when the next crisis comes, and it will come, we're all going to need each other. Chen stood and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the busy traffic patterns of the Nexus Junction. The hegemony has impressive industrial capacity and innovative technology. Your people are intelligent and adaptable, but you're also isolated and unprepared for what's really out there. And you're offering to help us prepare? I'm offering to help you survive. The galaxy is not a friendly place, Captain Vasquez. There are things in the deep dark that view organic life as either food or obstacles to be cleared away. The more civilizations we can bring into the Alliance, the better our chances of being ready when they come for us. Vasquez looked around the conference room, taking in the battle damage visible on some of the wall panels, the weapons lockers built into every surface, the way even this diplomatic meeting was conducted inside a warship ready for immediate combat. What would this alliance require of the hegemony? Mutual defense, technology sharing, coordination of resources during crises, and most importantly, acceptance that none of us are the dominant power in this region of space. We're all just trying to survive long enough to build something better. Chen returned to her seat, her expression growing more serious. I won't lie to you. The humans have made mistakes. We've been in wars that could have been avoided, lost people who didn't need to die, made enemies when we could have made friends. But we've learned from those mistakes. And part of what we've learned is that isolation kills civilizations. The Hegemony Council will need to consider this carefully, Vasquez said. This changes everything we thought we knew about the galaxy. Take all the time you need, Chen replied. But while you're considering, there are some things you should know. First, we have observation posts throughout this region of space. Not to spy on you, but to watch for threats from outside. Second, we're willing to share early warning data about potential dangers. And third, she paused, choosing her words carefully. The Karathi Republic has been asking questions about the hegemony. They've been tracking your expansion, and they're not entirely happy about your claims in the outer spiral. They're more aggressive in their diplomatic methods than we prefer. Is that a threat? It's a warning. The Karathi believe in preemptive action against potential threats. They've been discussing whether the hegemony represents a future problem that should be dealt with now. Chen activated another display showing a massive fleet of angular, predatory-looking vessels. These are Korathi dreadnoughts. Each one is larger and more heavily armed than my ship. They have approximately 300 of them, plus support vessels. The numbers were staggering. The entire hegemony fleet couldn't match even a quarter of what was shown on the display. However, Chen continued, they listened to human recommendations about diplomatic solutions. If the hegemony joins the alliance, the Korathi will consider you protected partners rather than potential threats. Vasquez realized she was witnessing a masterful piece of diplomacy. Chen was offering protection, alliance, and technological advancement, while simultaneously making it clear that the alternatives were potentially catastrophic. You make it sound like we don't have a choice. You always have a choice, Chen said quietly. But some choices lead to survival and growth, while others lead to isolation and eventual extinction. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders, but it's also full of things that will kill you without a second thought. She stood and extended her hand again. Go back to your people. Tell them what you've learned. Discuss it, debate it, take whatever time you need, but remember that while you're making your decision, the universe continues to be a dangerous place. As they shook hands, Vasquez felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. This moment would be remembered as either the beginning of a new age of cooperation or the last chance for peaceful contact that the hegemony had missed. One last question, she said. The name of your ship, Retribution. What does that mean? Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. It means that sometimes when someone threatens what you care about, you have to make sure they understand the cost of that choice. We named her after our first encounter with the Devourers, when we realized that mercy is a luxury only the strong can afford. As Vasquez and her delegation were escorted back to their shuttle, she understood that everything had indeed changed. The hegemony was no longer the dominant power in their region of space. They were just one civilization among many, trying to survive in a galaxy far more dangerous and complex than they had ever imagined. The question now was whether they would adapt quickly enough to thrive in this new reality, or whether they would become another cautionary tale about the consequences of pride and isolation.